Hello and welcome to an all-new episode of Anime Brain Freeze. We are your bizarre hosts.
I am John.
And I'm CC, and when there's just too much cool anime to watch, we got you covered. Today we finally dive back into the wonderfully weird world of one of our favorite franchises, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. The fifth chapter... The fifth chapter, Golden Wind, takes us to the gangstar's paradise of Italy, as we join Giorno Giovanna, Dio's son, in his attempt to become the leader of the biggest crime syndicate in the country. Ridiculous mind games and ferocious stand battles? Check. Flamboyant posing? Check, check. Surprisingly potent bits of character drama? Check, check, check. But before all that goodness, I have to assemble my MMORPG party and face ye old nemesis, the ever-looming, ever-hungry, seemingly insatiable Isekai / light novel hole. This time it presents itself in the edgy form of the Rising of the Shield Hero, the tale of a young man who, come on now, say it with me just one more time, gets sucked into a fantasy world.
Oh no, who would have thought?
Who could have seen this coming? But now with a twist, because seemingly everyone in this realm hates his fucking guts. And I can see why. Can the protagonist defeat the odds and become the hallowed savior he is destined to be? Well, stay tuned to find out. We'll be right back. Naofumi Iwatani, second-year college student, dedicated otaku, and general nobody, gets randomly sucked into a weird fantasy book one day and wakes up in the gamiest of isekai setups. He has been chosen to be one of the legendary 4 heroes who are supposed to protect this world from hordes of invading monsters called waves. But while his fellow warriors are equipped with a spear, a bow and a sword, Naofumi's legendary weapon turns out to be just a small shield, seemingly lacking any offensive capabilities. Not only that, but soon after his arrival, the entire country and even the other 3 heroes turn on Naofumi, and he is left to fend for himself. Quickly realizing that he won't be able to withstand the impending horrors of the first wave on his own, Naofumi raises enough funds by farming trash mobs to acquire the assistance of a party member in the form of the young tanuki demi-human Raftalia. Can this unlikely pairing survive the doom that awaits them? And can Naofumi clear his name and become the hero this world needs? The Rising of the Shield Hero was originally published as a web novel series between 2012 and 2015 and has since been rewritten and expanded upon in the form of a light novel that started in 2013. It's still ongoing and counts at this point 22 volumes. The author of the novels is one Aneko Usagi, which apparently is a pen name, so nothing is really known about the author, neither the gender nor anything else. There's also a manga adaptation and a spin-off light novel and manga that apparently features the spear hero that is also still ongoing. And then in January this year, we got the first season of this anime adaptation, counting 25 episodes. The anime is produced by Kinema Citrus, which I've talked about on our show before because they are responsible for one of my favorite series in recent years, Made in Abyss, which also has a movie coming up, which I am super excited about. But they also produce stuff like Black Bullet and Codebreaker, and you recently talked about them as well, John, in your review of Review Starlight, which is also a show they did, I think. Also great looking, if I remember correctly.
That show was a feast in terms of the animation.
Yeah, so I've heard. And the director for Shield Hero is Takao Abo, by the way, who has worked on a lot of stuff. He was the director for Nor 9, an episode and animation director on shows like Angelic Layer, Aquarion Evil, Macross Frontier, Black Lagoon, and a bunch of other things. And just like Review Starlight and Made in Abyss, Shield Hero is a really good-looking show as well. There are some very minor, noticeable shortcuts here and there, but overall it has a consistently great presentation with lushly painted backdrops and landscapes, fantastic fight choreography and animation, and good effects work. The CG is pretty meh. I have seen better, especially in the most recent seasons, but it's not so bad or used so overbearingly that it pulls you out of the show. Sometimes the big monsters are too stiff and choppy here and there, and that's it, kinda. So, not too bothersome. I think the biggest problem Shield Hero has in terms of its visuals is that its designs, even though consistent and not bad by themselves, they're colorful, they're sharp, are just these super box standard, boring fantasy video game designs. Like, imagine the most good looking but also most generic RPG characters, armors, towns, weapons, monsters, everything you can think of, and those will probably be in this show. And after watching something like Made in Abyss from the same studio, which puts forward a unique set piece, monster, or character design in almost every new episode, Shield Hero, just in terms of designs, felt really by the numbers. Which I guess makes sense, because the four heroes even joke in the beginning of the show how this is basically all your standard JRPG and MMO gimmicks thrown into a blender. So yeah, in that regard, it's consistent with its setup, but sadly also a bit boring to look at, which is kind of sad considering this is coming from Kinema Citrus, and like we said, I love the look of Made in Abyss, and you love the look of Review Starlight, so maybe I expected a bit more than that from them.
Mm-hmm.
What is definitely not boring is the music, because Kinema Citrus once again contracted the services of one British composer named Kevin Penkin, who also worked on Nor 9, Under the Dog, and created one of the most hauntingly beautiful anime soundtracks ever for Made in Abyss. And if there's one thing that I can recommend about Shield Hero without any reservation, it's the soundtrack. Just like this great mix of riveting battle hymns, melancholic vocal tracks, and just in general a prime example of setting the mood through music, even when the show does its best to fuck up the atmosphere masterfully established by its musical compositions. And this is where we get to Shield Hero's biggest problem, its story and characters, which, you know, is always a big part of a show, so that's
kind of important.
Yeah, don't worry about it. I have to admit, I was dreading this review, especially since this is probably the most show notes I've written down for any show on this podcast ever. Just because there was so much that bothered me in this thing. Just my rough, unstructured thoughts amount to 7 fucking pages, and that is before I turned them into something hopefully coherent. But yeah, since John was, as usual, the smarter one and hasn't watched this show, this, of course, means you people need to brace yourselves for a long monologue by me, which, granted, is what most of my single-person reviews turn into, but still, this one is gonna be extreme. I watched all of it, because just like John mentioned in his recent SAO review, I want my distaste of the series to be informed. Also, I'll try to stay away from most big spoilers, but some plot details I just have to mention to talk about the many things that bothered me in this show, so be aware of that. Alright, so with your usual Isekai stories, your main protagonist starts out pretty much like Naofumi does here as well. Unremarkable, friendly guy in real life, run-of-the-mill, often an otaku, not particularly good at anything. Then he gets transported to another world and is usually gifted with a special power, or it turns out that he had a hidden power or expertise all along that enables him to become the most OP character in his new life, be it video game knowledge or whatever. You know the deal. We've had that in SAO, we've had that in Knights and Magic and shit like that. So yeah, this is how these things usually go. No enemy can stand against him, all the waifus want his dick, yada yada yada. You know the drill. And we had some isekai shows who initially tried to put a light spin on that, like Overlord, where the protagonist is the bad guy of the story. Slime Time, where Rimuru, our main protagonist, at least gets an unusual body for an OP hero. Or on the complete other end of the spectrum, Konosuba, where all the characters turn out to be ginormous, incompetent fuck-ups. And these are usually the isekai stories we stick with, at least in your case, Konosuba, because they have something interesting and different to them that we can latch onto. Now, Shield Hero, in terms of the setup, does a pretty good job at catering to my interests in that regard, because as I alluded to in the plot summary, quickly after Naofumi wakes up in the other world, everything turns to shit for him. He turns out to be the weakest of the 4 heroes. He's naive, so he's quickly being taken advantage of and then shunned by pretty much everyone and left all alone in this dangerous new world. So that in itself is super cool, and you can do a lot with that setup. And the show tries to do something and fails on pretty much every front. Let's start with Naofumi himself. I think in a story like this, especially when the odds are stacked against your main protagonist, that main character needs to be pretty sympathetic, because that makes you want to root for him and doesn't need you to rely on painting the antagonist so over the top evil that they become cartoons, pun intended. The problem is, even if maybe unintended, Naofumi comes across as kind of a dick from the get-go. I mean, not from the very start. We first learned that he helped out his little brother, who was on the verge of breaking bad, and therefore Naofumi is now allowed to stay with his parents, rent-free plus allowance, which means he can spend all of his money on nerd shit. And I'm like, hey, okay, he cares for his family cares for him, good guy. And then one of the very next scenes is him opening the fateful Isekai book, looking at the picture of a princess and saying, wait, this princess can't be the heroine. She looks too slutty. And I'm like, huh, great. Fantastic. We're off to a great start. Like, if you want me to root for your character in your Icky revenge story that comes with enough other baggage as it is, and we'll get to that, don't clue me in on who that character really might be deep down in the very beginning. Like, everything that joke was missing was Naofumi turning to the camera afterwards, winking and saying, you know what I'm saying, bros? Bitches, am I right? Like, fucking... In fact, many scenes in that show could have included that, and it would have felt like a logical conversion of the subtext into text and not feel misplaced, because it fits the attitude of the show. And that, not a good thing. Not a good thing. So after that fantastic introduction to our main character, he gets whisked away to the fantasy land, meets up with the other heroes, who are also all from a version of our Earth, but slightly different, as it turns out, with different political figures and all that. Then each of them gets assigned a party, but nobody wants to hang with the shield hero, because he is the weakest. And as it later turns out, the king, and I think the church as well, have some grudge against him, and might or might not have besmirched his name in advance as well, but that is not really clarified. But this is where the next problem popped up for me. Shield Hero is one of the most gamified isekai anime I've ever seen. The setup, the gameplay rules, quote unquote, the economy in the world, the battles, the quest lines, the fucking magical UI overlays. This whole world looks and works exactly like an MMORPG, to the most minute detail, which I appreciated, actually. They explain Naofumi's skill tree, how he can craft stuff, how leveling works, and if you have ever played a JRPG or MMORPG, all of this will give you a giant deja vu, and you'll be like, yeah, I've used that system before, I get it. They implemented that in a really neat way, cool. So there was obviously a lot of thought put into that. So how the fuck is Naofumi the weakest, most undesired hero when he's a goddamn tank? Motherfucker, if you have played, for example, Final Fantasy XIV, you know that if you are a decent tank or healer, you are set for fucking life.
You don't gotta wait in line for any dungeons.
No, every party will take you with the greatest pleasure. You are showered with recommendations. You can quickly get in any dungeon queue, while your damage dealers, which is what the spear, sword, or bow hero would be, have to wait patiently in line. So they created the most video gamey story ever, put so much effort into integrating all those RPG mechanics into their world in a way that they don't feel alien and make sense, and then they give the underdog one of the best classes in any MMO and just hand wave it by saying, he's the weakest because he has no offensive capabilities. Which is not true, by the way, he totally does. Like, fucking do your research. I mean, Naofumi is not even incompetent. It takes some time because he is alone at first, but he gets really good at using his skills soon. And of course, as it turns out, his shield is the most OP weapon of them all. Well, fucking duh. I could have told you that. John could have told you that. Of course.
Without watching the show, it could have been like, it's the rising of the shield hero.
Yeah, and even, if you've played one of those games, you're like, yeah, that's obviously not all there is to that weapon. Of course, the other heroes don't get it and call him a cheat. Hey assholes! Weren't you all boasting about being hardcore MMO nerds? How the fuck do you not get how this works? I mean, the other heroes are all self-absorbed dicks anyway, and now Fumi regularly has to clean up after their messes. So it kind of fits their characters, but still. As you can see, the show is not even consistent in the rule set it establishes in the very beginning for its world, which probably doesn't bother anyone who has never played that kind of game before, but I have, and it seems the author has too, so this felt just contrived to me, and not well researched and implemented, which is weird. So yeah, but nobody wants to hang with Naofumi except for one girl called Mine, who is immediately suspicious because she is way too friendly to him when everyone else isn't. But Naofumi is a doofus and obviously wants to tap that, so he's the only one surprised when it turns out that Mine was only out for his gear and money, and also accuses him of having sexually assaulted her.
Oh.
Which is the next problem of the show. Sexually assault as a plot point is problematic enough as it is, especially if it is a wrongful accusation. Don't get me wrong, those things happen in real life. We recently actually had a pretty prominent court case wrapping up here in Germany where a woman accused her boyfriend of raping her, which turned out to be a lie. So yeah, I'm not saying that this never happens, but the clear majority are still women being sexually assaulted, coming forward and then not being believed or being too scared to come forward at all. Thankfully, things have started to shift with the Me Too movement and everything. But yeah, this is not a 50-50 equation. So if you have to, because you feel it's necessary for your story, for whatever reason, you can employ such a plot device. But you need to be a really good writer and handle that subject matter with a lot of care, subtlety, sensitivity, finesse, and tact. In German, I would say Fingerspitzengefühl. Sadly, Shield Hero has the subtlety of a wrecking ball and the tact of fucking Mechagodzilla. Mine is clearly painted as the bad guy. She is an opportunistic evil asshole, no doubt about it. The show makes that very clear. Now, Fumi runs into her several times during the show, and every time she is trying to fuck him over again in one way or another. The problem is the way she behaves and the lengths she goes to manipulate everyone around her and make now Fumi's life a living hell are so over the top, so ridiculous, far-fetched, and dumb, altered magical video recordings included, that she comes across as silly and cartoony. She cackles all the time, like some kind of witch from a Disney musical. She also joins the spear hero Motoyasu's party, who is a complete buffoon. And he, of course, believes everything she says and is attacking Naofumi every time he sees him. And he wears white armor. He is a literal white knight. And the biggest idiot in this story. I hope you all see what the show is doing here. But yeah, those two are so fucking cartoony. They are literally this serious version of Team Rocket from Pokemon. Mine is Jesse, Motoyasu is James, and the king is Meowth, I guess. Which, of course, keeps me from taking those guys and anything they do seriously, especially since it mostly quickly flies in their faces. But it also makes light of the whole sexual assault accusation thing, which you really should not do, guys. Like, yowzer. It is incredibly tone deaf, and I'm not even getting into Mine's eventual punishment, which I won't give away here. But despite her being this giant piece of shit who definitely has it coming, the way that moment is framed feels so gross and unnecessary because it tries to turn it into this big joke, and it just doesn't work, like not at all. So yeah, Mine accuses Naofumi of the sexual assault. Everyone in the kingdom turns against him, the heroes too, like I said. It also turns out Mine, or Malti, is the first princess, so that makes things worse, and also immediately clues you in on the fact that the king is also behind this. And because this kingdom apparently borrowed its judicial system from the Phoenix Wright games, ultimately, yeah, super fair process there. Ultimately, Naofumi is stripped of all his belongings and is left with nothing but the clothes on his body and his shield. And this is when he turns into the edgelordiest edgelord that ever edgelorded. He decides to hate everyone in this country because all of them want to fuck him over, naturally, of course. All that matters is money. He doesn't want to risk letting anyone into his heart anymore. He basically says, if you want me to be an asshole, I'll be the asshole that you are painting me to be, and I'll show you all. Ah! Which is a very mature approach to the whole ordeal. He basically erects an emotional barrier to protect himself. A shield, you might say.
Stop.
Ah!
Stop.
Yeah, that's what I said to the show. Please stop. And even though he has no offensive capabilities in the beginning, he is pretty feisty because his shield turns out to give him an aura that makes him invulnerable to low-level monsters. Gee, what a surprise. And so he just collects trash mobs and sells them for materials. He also later learns to craft various potions, which he can also sell for a high price. And all of that was super cool. Like I said, the way the show integrates its RPG mechanics and makes them part of the plot and character progressions is a lot of fun, especially if you're familiar with games that use those systems. So yeah, he slowly works his way towards good gear and eventually enough money to get a party member. Now, the problem is, since his reputation has tanked to the lowest possible point, almost nobody wants to work with him. Some shop owners begrudgingly do because they want his money, and there's an armor and weapon shop owner who seems to see past the lies and becomes pretty fond of Naofumi, wants to kind of sponsor him. But Naofumi can't find a mercenary that would work with him, and he desperately needs a damage dealer in his party, because the first wave is drawing near and those are not low-level monsters anymore. So what does he do? He goes to the town's resident slave trader. Yeah, woof. Okay, here we are, friends. This is the show's last and maybe biggest problem I want to highlight, because again, just like with the sexual assault stuff, if you really need to touch upon that kind of subject matter in your story, you need a lot of Fingerspitzengefühl, which Shield Hero just doesn't even try to bother with. So as it turns out, there is a race called demi-humans in this world, which are basically half human, half animal, barely half animal. It's like, it's anime girls or boys with animal ears and tails, and that's it. Which are kept as slaves. Yeah, fantastic. So the jolly slave trader sells Naofumi the only slave he has left, a little 10-year-old tanuki/raccoon slave girl called Raphtalia. And how slavery works in this world is the slaves get a magical seal imprinted on their bodies and henceforth must follow their master's every order, or he can just force them to do it via the seal, which also causes them a great amount of pain. Fantastic. So Naofumi buys this 10-year-old girl and equips her with a sword and says, hey, you must fight for me or else both of us are gonna die. And when the first monster attacks them and Raphtalia is too scared to fight, he uses the seal to make her fight and kill it. Which, boy, I don't even know where to begin with how fucked up that is in how many fucking different aspects.
It's like the command seals from Fate, but worse.
Yes, much worse. And of course, this is the show's intent. It wants to show how desperate Naofumi is, that this is the only way he sees to survive. This evil world and its people don't leave him any other choice, blah, blah, blah. But the execution on all of this is so mind-numbingly offensive and dilettante that it can get really irksome. It got for me. And the fact that they are demi-humans is only used to make the slave thing more acceptable, I guess. Like, kind of a plausible deniability. Like the show wants to have its cake and eat it too by treating them like Pokemon and humans at the same time. It also takes him way too long to open up and be nice to Raphtalia, in my opinion, which of course they handwaved by him being so hurt by Mind's betrayal that he doesn't want to leave himself emotionally vulnerable to other people anymore. And I'm like, dude, you are a fucking 20-something who got fucked over by some assholes. This is a child whose parents got killed in one of the waves. She has been enslaved and survived God knows how many traumatic experiences. And you're gonna be the whiny cold bitch in this relationship? Like, fucking give me a break, you precious little flower, you. Goddamn. And it's not just Raphtalia. Like, Naofumi treats every person that is nice to him like an asshole for at least the first half of the show. One of the characters that get introduced later, Melty, Mind's sister, is really nice, and Naofumi initially doesn't treat her like a complete piece of shit. But then he learns that she is royalty and immediately, without any reason besides him having been fucked over by the king and first princess, turns super hard on her and treats her like garbage. Like, what the hell? Like, if you expect the worst from every new person you meet because a few people fucked you over, it says more about you than about them. I've been fucked over by people in my life, and sure, I have rejected them after that occasionally, but you don't see me treating any new person that comes into my life and is friendly with suspicion and anger. You are not fucking 12. Get a grip, guy. Like, holy shit, this character. How is that your main protagonist? I don't believe it. And this is not the only issue I have with the slavery plot in this. The show takes a whopping 15 episodes before it dares to say something along the lines of, yo guys, I think slavery is bad.
What?
Which, okay, granted, if you are a normal human being, you just assume, right? But I would have still liked our main hero to remark on that apparently little known fact maybe a bit sooner. You know, because he's from our world, where that should be a given. But nope, he also buys a second enslaved demi-human in the form of Philo, who is great, by the way. And basically, what if your chocobo was a fucking damage-dealing monk? That also can be ridden like a chocobo and pull your cart and everything. She's great. She starts out as a legit chocobo and then levels up far enough so that she can assume the form of a little girl with wings. Raftalia levels up too, by the way, and gets the body of a 17-year-old at some point, but mentally she is still 10, and Philo is like maybe 6, which makes the fact that they really clamor for Naofumi's dick quite problematic in itself, if looked at too closely. It's like, master. I am gonna marry master. No, I'm gonna marry master. Yeah, that happens constantly. But yeah, the way he gets Philo is through a so-called egg lottery, which is basically just a gacha game, which Naofumi smirkingly remarks on, mentions by name. He says, well, that's just a gacha game. I mean, I like that the show pokes fun at its obvious gamified mechanics, but did you have to use that specific context for that joke?
No, you won't get it otherwise, so I have to spell it out for you.
Yeah. The slave trader, who is, by the way, painted as this jolly fat circus ringmaster guy, also says that thanks to Naofumi's slaves becoming famous for their achievements after a while, his slave business is booming. Good for fucking you, buddy. I hope Naofumi is super proud of that. Oh, I bet he is. But at least with Raftalia and Philo in his life, Naofumi starts to become more mellow and even begins to treat other people nicely and not just as profit generators after a while. For example, he helps the impoverished villages who are the victims of a revolution the bow hero incited, without thinking about the big picture. So, hey, Naofumi can be a nice person after all. But in the beginning of the show, that rarely happens. And it sometimes feels like the show is going a bit back and forth on that development. So, not consistent at all. But yeah, after a while, he finally starts to open up to Raftalia and Philo, and they slowly become not only an RPG party, but also a legit family. Naturally, the execution on this is as ham-fisted as anything else in the show, and thus gave me the biggest laughs while watching the series. And I'm just gonna pick my favorite moments here for texture. In the beginning, Naofumi and Raftalia eat together, and Naofumi remarks, "Ever since that day, nothing I eat has any flavor." With that really grim voice and face. And my god. Yeah, that got me good.
Huh.
Yeah, subtle this show is not. When Raftalia gets hurt in battle, she asks him to lay in bed with her to keep her warm. To which he replies that he will ask Philo to do it because, and I quote, "I am not warm." Womp womp. Might have laughed a straight minute when my speakers vomited out that legendary line. And my favorite laugh out loud moment in the show is Naofumi, believe it or not, has a literal edgelord skill tree called the Curse Tree. So when he and his party fight a dragon zombie, he unlocks that tree by envisioning the dragon as mine. His eyes turn red, and he just resorts to yelling, "Hate!" for like, I don't know, several seconds, and then unleashing his powerful attack. And that fucking slayed me. It's probably supposed to be the super dramatic scene, but it's so dumb and executed so poorly that it at least had great comedic value, but nothing else. Boy, and those are only some of the highlights in that show when it comes to trying to stage powerful emotional moments that completely backfire because it's so dumb and ham-fisted and over the top and tone-deaf and everything, and so self-serious and so edgelordy. Nothing about this works. Not at all. And this power, like this curse tree, is also a two-edged sword because he can't control it and hurts Raftalia by accident. So, as you see, he doesn't want to hurt the people he loves. This cruel world makes him do it, you see? He needs to use his cursed Edgelord shield because his cruel world doesn't leave him a choice. And how do you still not get what this story is doing? This whole aspect of the show is such a cheap Berserk ripoff with none of the nuance and a lot more yucky baggage and subtext. Although that scene kinda marks the character turn for Naofumi, which should have come much earlier, to be honest, because he risks losing himself in the hate and anger. And the only one able to pull him out of that initially is Raftalia, and, well, later his other party members. Which leads to what could have been one of the best scenes in the show, where Naofumi is forced into a duel against Motoyasu, which he wins, but then gets fucked over by Mine again, being sneaky, like manipulating stuff, attacking him from behind and stuff like that with magic, without anyone seeing that. And Raftalia gets taken away from him. Motoyasu rids her of the slave seal, which should be a good thing, but the show paints it as a bad thing. Because the literally dumbest character in the show, Motoyasu, is the one doing it. And the one saying that slavery is a bad thing and that Raftalia should be free is Motoyasu. And of course he's right. The problem is, since the show is letting him say this, and he is a giant flaming idiot, that of course automatically means in the context of the show that he doesn't understand that whole slavery thing either. Because as Raftalia puts it, Naofumi-sama fed me everything I wanted to eat. He gave me valuable medicine to treat my illness. Are you capable of that? If that were true, you would have a slave by your side too. Which is such a fucking galaxy brain approach to the whole thing. I can't even. Like, how do you come up with that? It's just mind-bendingly stupid. Holy shit. This fucking show. So she insists on putting the slave seal back on her body, right between her tits, naturally, because it's visual proof of her affection for Naofumi and her dedication, which, my god, this fucking show. Also, it's not like Naofumi saved her from a lifetime of horrible slavery by giving her a lifetime of good slavery? Jesus fucking Christ. But because he had no other option than to rely on slaves. Like, for all his money-grubbing ways, he has never tried to use some of that money to, I don't know, maybe free some slaves and remove their seals? Just a suggestion here. And he could have removed that seal from Raftalia at any point before this, especially since she had already stated that she wanted to stay by his side because she loves him and everything. But he didn't do that either. And it's not like he's taking serious steps to abolish slavery once he has cleared his name either. That falls on the shoulders of a completely different character. And Naofumi also, near the end of the show, uses the slave seal again on Philo, even after his character turn, so he can easily sniff out her location by her screams, which is pretty what the fuck, dude, even if time was of the essence in that case. So, yeah, he wasn't acting out of the goodness of his heart, girl, especially not in the beginning. You are suffering from borderline Stockholm syndrome. That
Borderline?
Yeah, just not kidding. That's the only thing I can read that. It's like, oh god, I love him. He treated me so well. I'm his favorite slave. But yeah, she rushes to Naofumi, who is on the edge of being overcome by his fucking rage shield, which he activates by shouting hate reaction, by the way. Even later in the show when he's not that angry anymore, which seems like kind of a weird oversight. But, hey, I'm kind of balanced now, and I love all the people around me. Oh, there's a monster. Hate reaction! And I'm like, what? What is going on? But yeah, Raphtalia rushes into his arms and pulls him out of his darkness, which is really nicely staged, and the music is good and everything. And his sense of taste comes back to him. Subtle, I know. But without the unnecessarily icky slavery subtext hanging out in the background, this could have been a legit great scene. Just in terms of voice acting, presentation, all of that. But alas, it doesn't work because of all that baggage on the side. And this is probably the most bothersome thing for me about Shield Hero. This show, from the setup alone, had a lot of potential to be something interesting and special, especially in the Isekai genre. You don't have to change that much, I think, to make this a good story. Like, leave the world as it is, but change some important aspects about the characters and the story. You don't even have to make Naofumi a goody two-shoes in the beginning. Like, Final Fantasy VII and Berserk are two good examples of stories that start with kinda dickish, slightly cold and unsympathetic characters that get a big turnaround in the course of the story and manage to capture your sympathies very effectively, in my opinion. So you can do that if your writing is up to snuff and consistent, which it wasn't in this show, in case of its main character. Naofumi's arc isn't bad in itself, but it would have been a lot more emotionally resonant if it had been handled with more finesse, or any finesse, really. And maybe don't make the inciting incident a false rape accusation. Make it something else. And if you really have to use that risque plot device because you want to be over the edge, don't make your villains the fucking laughingstock of the show. Give them good personal motivations and don't handwave the whole shit with a vague conspiracy plot, which they did here. And maybe don't use slavery as an important plot vehicle either. Raphtalia is super sympathetic and a badass fighter. Couldn't you have, put those characters in a different story? Where does their worth get measured in how devoted they are to their master? These characters have potential, and by giving them that shitty slave background, you've ruined them forever. Make Raphtalia an orphan that tries to steal food from Naofumi and he takes her in or something like that. But not like this. It doesn't work and feels like garbage. Or hell, if you say, oh, but we need the slavery in here to show how harsh and merciless this fantasy world is. All right. I'll play. Let's entertain that thought. Remember the scene in Magi where Morgiana breaks her literal shackles of enslavement to help her friends?
Yeah.
Remember how badass that scene was and what a rewarding character moment that was?
It was great.
Yeah, remember how she started dancing at the festival after this happened for the first time because she wasn't wearing shackles anymore and she freed herself to celebrate her newfound freedom? Remember how good and satisfying that felt? Yeah. You could have done something like that, Shield Hero. You could have. It's not that hard. I guess I also should address Magus Bride, because that is a show we reviewed that I liked, and that uses that slavery plot device as well. But in a completely different, much more well-written way, in my opinion. Ancient Magus Bride never says that slavery is good, which Shield Hero does, kinda, albeit in a weirdly convoluted way that is supposed to come across as heartfelt. When fucking Raphtalia puts the slave crest back on her chest and, it's like, it's because I'm so dedicated to Naofumi. Some women in the audience are like, oh, that's so romantic. And I'm like, no, it's not. Not at all. Holy shit, guys, what the fuck? But yeah, the only people who say slavery is bad in Shield Hero are the antagonists, coloring it as the wrong stance on the matter, effectively. Which Ancient Magus Bride doesn't do. Also in Ancient Magus Bride, Chise sold herself into slavery because she was suffering from severe depression and had no self-worth whatsoever. She lost her mom, all that stuff. She wasn't enslaved by some asshole. It doesn't make it much better, and it's still the most problematic thing about that show because she's still kind of saved by Elias instead of saving herself, really. But regardless, it's a completely different way of handling that subject matter with a completely different tone. Framing and author's intent are very important, especially when it comes to these problematic themes. So as you can see, if you are a good enough writer, you can employ most of these risque plot devices in your story without them feeling too off-putting or problematic. Shield Hero did not pull this off at all, It's very much like SAO Alicization in that regard, which also tried to tackle serious dark topics without having the writing chops, knowledge, or respect for the subject matter to pull it off. I think we both agreed on that.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a shame because, like I said, I liked some of Shield Hero's characters. Raftalia Philo Melty, Mine's sister, like I mentioned her before, they're all great. Some of the side characters and obvious NPCs are also great. I like the world building, the fights are well choreographed and often have fantastic looking fluid animation. They make great use of the classic tank, damage dealer, healer party setup in the story. There are some cool combo attacks like in Chrono Trigger. The characters actually have to use their brains while fighting the waves. All of the action in the show is really good. The art in general is good, albeit a bit too generic, like I said, but at least it's sharp and colorful. The music is amazing. Like I said, Kevin Penkin maybe delivered his best work yet. I still probably like Mated Abyss more, or his work in Mated Abyss more, but that was also a much better show. So maybe that elevated that over the music in Shield Hero, which, like I said, is fantastic. There's enough good shit in this show, enough things to like. The problem is it's all dragged down by some abysmal story and character writing that only gets mildly better in the back half of the show. If you don't have a problem with most of the things I talked about that bothered me, you can check out the show on Funimation and Crunchyroll, who promoted the shit out of this series, by the way. Holy fuck, kind of gross, but I think they did the same with Goblin Slayer, so I'm not surprised, really.
Yeah, there was a big media push for this show. And, just hearing you talk about it now, and while it was showing, made me kind of like, I don't know if this is what you want to throw your weight behind.
Yeah, yet they did.
Yeah.
And I guess it paid off, right? I think it was a pretty popular show, just in terms of viewing numbers, if I'm not
popular
mistaken.
Enough, I guess. It got people talking.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if that was just because of the questionable subject matter or because really enough people watched it in the end. But we'll see if we get a second season or something. If you think you might have a problem with that stuff as well, maybe see how long you can last before you throw in the towel. Like I said, most of the really nasty stuff is in the first half of the show, with maybe the exception of Mind's Fate at the very end. If you like RPGs or fantasy enough, maybe you can see past all that. Enough people can. That story has a lot of fans. I'm not one of them. Sorry, I tried. There's a lot I liked. There is enough that I could have liked. But ultimately, this was a bad experience. I mean, let's face it, it's always silly getting so worked up about a fucking cartoon. Let's be real. And I only do that for the sake of the review and maybe make it more entertaining. But rarely had a show so many conceptually interesting ideas that left me dumbfounded because of their horrible execution. And by the way, for the fanboys out there, if you don't mind the shitty way the series tackles some of its themes, that's fine. But don't try to deny that those themes are in there and are incompetently handled at best. So yeah, while the ending teases some interesting plot developments for a possible future season, I personally don't know if Shield Hero has turned me into enough of a Stockholm Syndrome victim to let myself get enslaved by that shitty world and some of its shitty characters one more time.
Naples, 2001. Giorno Giovanna is a small-time crook with one big dream: to become a gang star. Can't see it, but I'm posing. No ordinary thief, Giorno has a connection to the remarkable Joestar bloodline and possesses a stand named Gold Experience. His dream starts to become reality when he meets Bruno Bucciarati, a mobster from the gang Passione, and a fellow stand user himself. Realizing that they share similar ideals and both disagree with the gang's harmful affairs, Giorno reveals his goal to Bruno, and with Bruno's help, he will help reform Passione by overthrowing the boss. As Giorno becomes a member and is inducted into Bruno's squad, he discovers that it is no simple gang. Its numbers are teeming with stand users. Now confronted by other squads of differing loyalties and unpredictable caliber, their goal to change the gang from the inside out will be a tough one. Taking on these adversaries, Giorno attempts to rise through the ranks and inch closer to the boss, a man who is shrouded in mystery. So, it's time for part 5.
Back again on the JoJo train, baby.
Hell yeah, JoJo Friday every Friday.
Mm-hmm. The best Friday.
When's part 6 though? Anyway.
5 years. I don't know. How long was the break between part 4 and 5? I don't remember.
Diamond ended December 23rd, 2016. And Gold began July 5th, 2018. So about a year and a half.
That's fine, I guess.
Yeah, so, the wait was not as long as, the rabid JoJo fan inside every single one of us, including you, who's listening, even if you're not.
If you're not, you should become one. Dedicate your life to JoJo's.
And to Sympho Gear. I'm going to push my agenda at this moment, too. No, but the wait was actually not as long as I remember it being now, looking at that. Man, getting into the show as a whole, I remember it must have been sometime after the first series ended. I just sort of sat down and started watching it, and you were like, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And now here we are.
Mm-hmm. By the way, as usual with our continued series reviews, this will be full spoilers. That doesn't mean we will spoil everything, maybe. We just don't know it yet. Because this is a loose discussion on just basic show notes and everything. And if we remember something interesting or stuff like that, that is a spoiler, we might talk about that. So, if you don't want to know anything, we have done 2 reviews on the other JoJo seasons, like the first 3 in one episode and the 4th in another one. And you can go back to the very first one. I think there weren't too many spoilers in those, or at least we marked those. Yeah, I think we marked those. So if you want to get a basic idea about what JoJo's is, which is a good idea because
otherwise this won't make a lick of sense.
Exactly. Then maybe go back to that and listen to that first. And if you are only here to hear our opinions on this season of JoJo's, on this part of JoJo's, then you already know what's coming. And we'll just get right into it. Yeah, John, what did you think about part 5, especially when compared to the other parts?
I wasn't so sure about it at first. I feel like it took me a little bit to warm up to it, because I still think even after having watched part 5 all the way through, that my favorite is probably still part 4, because, I don't know, something about Josuke and his goof-ass crew is great. But, there's a lot to like with Giorno and all of his, and, the crew that he ends up rolling around with. I mean, I guess Giorno kind of starts out being sort of an character, not like, I guess not really like bad per se, but kind of a blank slate character.
Well, he's a bit of a dick. I mean, he robs people. He's a criminal, right?
Yeah, I mean, but,
he's a good heart, yes.
I guess, the tried and true trope of a thief with a heart of gold.
Yes. Kind of like Lupin.
Gold.
Yeah. Most fitting, yes. But that's the setup of the story. Like, Koichi from part 4 is, coming to Italy because he has, or I don't know if Jotaro got him that intel, but somehow he got hold of intel that the son of Dio might be in Italy. So he wants to investigate, and Jotaro is that.
Yeah, I kind of like that even though it's as brief as it is, we have that bridge from part 4 to part 5.
Yeah, that was very nice. I think the show has been pretty good at like loosely bridging each of their parts to each other. I mean, part at least 1 and 3 had a stronger connection by featuring the same bad guy, right? And some of the same characters. But even when they completely changed the character roster, there's like this small connection with in part 4 with Jotaro being with Joseph being the dad of the main protagonist of Josuke, and in part 5, like Giorno being Dio's son, even though he doesn't know that he's Dio's son. Like I don't know if did he grow up as an orphan, or did mom just die at some point? I already forgot.
Yeah, I think it was something like that. I'm having trouble recalling.
But yeah, he grew up on the streets, basically. So that's what happens. And kind of, got in contact with the mafia, one things or another. We don't need to give that away. Like that's one of the most interesting things, and I think one of the best things about this part 5 is the character background stories. Because I think those are the most, like, the characters in part 5 are not super deep, but they have depth, which you can't necessarily say about the characters in the previous JoJo parts, really.
Yeah.
I mean, they're pretty simple. Like, what you see is what you get with most of them. I guess Koichi is a bit has some stuff going for him, and maybe Josuke to some extent, and Okuyasu maybe too. The thing with his brother and everything, but it's not super. It's pretty basic, and I think part 5 does a really good job at making at giving us these very diverse. These very interesting characters with very interesting backgrounds who just found each other through one way or another and became like this I don't know, makeshift family kinda for each other. And they are really like the whole gang around Bruno. Jono joins too, but Bruno already has this like small circle of gang members that he keeps around. We have.
There's Bruno, Abakio, Narancia, Fugo,
Mista.
And Mista, yes.
Yes.
How could I forget Mista?
Yeah, and they're all pretty great. They're all punks, like to one degree or another. Like some of them are worse than others, but all of them are, a bit on the assholer side. If you want to see something like a bit brutish. In certain moments, but that's also where the fun comes in. Like, these are all not necessarily always nice people, especially not to bad guys. But I mean, we had that before with other JoJo characters. But these two, especially these characters, especially because they're also criminals and everything. But there are a lot of funny scenes, like where they randomly kick the shit out of the guy just because they think he's a bad guy, and then notice while they're doing that, oh wait, that can't be the guy. It still keep on kicking him, and I'm like, what? What's happening?
My God, my favorite part of that is still Abakio sitting there, sipping his wine, and then hard cut to the next scene where he's up there kicking with him.
Yeah, just because that guy annoyed him. Anyway, yeah, that's those are the characters. They are punks, just like that. They're criminals, but they got interesting character motivations, understandable character motivations, and surprising death. And these characters are maybe form an even stronger emotional core than any of the team constellations we had in previous JoJo's incarnations. All of these feel like a legit family. Giorno too, after a while, even after he joins, even though the other team members are a bit suspicious of him at first, but then he gets integrated into the group more and more. And it's all through the help of Bruno, because he believes in Giorno. He believes he can be the good head of the evil organization, basically, that can turn things in the city around, which is what Bruno wants. And yeah, so they become this kind of tight-knit bunch of jackasses that act like a family. And it's endearing. It's cool. Like, you legit feel that these characters care for each other. And, one of them is maybe the fussy mom, and one of, is the dad character and everything. One is the dumb little brother, the dumb big brother, Mista and Narancia come to mind. Narancia's probably the dumbest character in this, but he's also the most, like, straightforward, open-hearted, like, wearing his intention on his sleeve character. And one of the best moments, or two of the best moments, like, relate to him. Like, the plot of the show is basically, or what happens in the show is, after a while, the team gets the the mission to collect the daughter of the boss and bring her to him. And Trish had a very difficult life, and Narancia sees himself at some point in the show, like recognizes like who Trish is, how she has lived her life is very close to his own life experience. And the moment of him realizing that and literally yelling out loud, "Oh my God, Trish is me! I'm Trish! Holy shit!" is so great. It's fantastic and heartwarming. And what happens in that scene is also fantastic because it's like this big pivotal moment in the show where, you know, some allegiances are kind of broken up and mix anew and everything, and a new chapter starts and all that. And it's just this very important character moment for both of these characters. And that's great. And I don't know if we had something with such an emotional depth in the other JoJo's parts before. I don't think so. I'm not sure if you can think of something.
Nothing readily springs to mind.
Yeah, so that really sprung out at me. I think, I mean, I'm in to see where Stone Ocean goes, but I think that shows that Araki has grown as a writer over the course of writing this series and gets better and better, like in terms of characterization. Like starts us as this really standard shonen thing, and then, you know, gets more diverse with the story setups and the mind games and everything and the battle stuff, and thinking all that way through. And then his character, then the characters get better and better and more interesting. And I think Golden Wind is where that comes through really well for the first time in regards to the characters. So this is what I really appreciated in this part. But I also have to agree with you that I don't think this is my favorite season. Despite all that good stuff. I think I still like Stardust Crusaders the most. Mm-hmm. I think, yeah, I mean, it's still one of the most straightforward ones, but just the setup of the world tour, all characters have to go on seeing these many different vistas is very cool, while all of this, like, don't get me wrong, Part 5 has many different cities and towns and interesting vistas as well. I mean, they go to fucking Rome and you see the Colosseum and everything. Like, there are a lot of interesting set pieces in this. But still, like, Stardust Crusaders, just in terms of setting, different settings, felt much more versatile. And
because it was more of a, like you said, a globe-trotting story where you're going through, like, Southwest Asia up into, you know, Northeastern Africa.
Yeah.
Whereas everything else is, you know, a bit more focused, but it's in different locations. I mean, Stone Ocean is going to be in Florida, so. And
I think, I don't know if I remember correctly, but I think it's mostly set in prison or something.
Maybe.
I think
but
so.
I just know
it's a Prison Break show.
I just know parts of the story take place in Florida.
Okay. Yeah, we'll see. I'm super interested in that, of course. I mean, come on. Even more interested for Steel Run, but that's going to be a while until we get that.
Yeah.
But yeah, still, because those two parts, like 3 and 5, are kind of similar in the way they are structured. It's like this very straightforward mission that our characters are on, at least from a certain point onwards. They have a very clear bad guy at a certain point, and then it's just getting to that, or getting to a specific point or specific location to wrap up the story. And that's the same thing that happens in both. And in Stardust Crusaders, just there's more interesting things to see on the way. The characters are cool in both of those stories. But I also think the bad guy in Stardust Crusaders is better than in Part 5. Because I had some issues with the boss, or Diavolo, or Doppio. And we'll get to that. I think Dio was still the stronger villain, even though he was straightforward. But just from the way he was presented, from the way he was set up in the previous season and everything, and the way he talked, the way he acted, his physical prowess and everything, his stand, all that felt a bit, I don't know, cooler and consistently menacing than the boss did in Part 5. Who, spoilers, like I said, turns out to be the bad guy, even though we initially think that, you know, the guys are going to work for him, but it turns out he wants his daughter killed, and, you know, the guys, obviously, after getting to know Trish, have some trouble with that and kind of want to end him, and then they get hunted down by pretty much everyone. A bunch of kill squads, which that's basically the main story that happens here. Like the characters try to reach the boss, and then after that try to reach the Colosseum, because that's where they can find out who the boss is and how to beat him and everything. That's the basic setup. It's a bit more complicated than that, but that's how it works out. And then there are a bunch of hunters that come after him. First, because they want to kill the boss, and then there are characters who are sent by the boss. I think that's how it works. Anyway, yeah, bunch of different kill squads with lots of crazy powers. Like, if you thought part 3 and 4 had the craziest stand battles, fucking buckle up. It's like, there's the most outlandish stuff in here. Like, I'm always amazed at how creative Araki gets with the fucking stand battles and what can be a stand in this universe.
How does he pull these ideas out of his head, man?
Or out of his ass.
Well,
Yeah, you can think that, often it's like the way certain fights develop, it's like he made that up on the spot. Like, he didn't plan for that. That's impossible. But
that's like when people point out inconsistencies directly to him, he's like, oh, I forgot.
Yeah.
Just that simple.
Yeah, exactly. The thing is, the story is so crazy, the characters are so crazy, all the setup is so ridiculous that it all works. It doesn't feel alien. You're just like, you're in for the ride, and you're like, yeah, okay, sure. This is how this works. I get it. I believe it, right? So that's not a problem at all. And it's super fun. Like, there's so many very different stands. Some downright fucking creepy stuff, like the battle of Trish and Spice Girl, which is the name of her stand, I think, against that one weird blob of flesh that consumes everything in the plane. There was a really chilling fight. It was fantastic.
Yeah, the show's genre kind of changed to horror.
Yeah, there's a bunch of horror imagery in this, like a bunch of it. I mean, there was already in part 3 and part 4 partially, although part 4 was a bit goofier, except for the whole Kira stuff. But it definitely, like, again, goes for all JoJo shows. If you have an easily upset stomach, maybe don't watch this show.
That's good advice.
It's very gory. It's very much, there's a lot of splatter in this, a lot of torn off limbs and bloody holes and everything. And I feel like part 4 and 5 went even more overboard with this than the previous 3 seasons, because both the main characters in part 4 and part 5 had abilities to heal people. So if you have a main character who can basically heal anything, as long as he has his 2 arms, which becomes an important plot point in one of the fights, actually, you can obviously fuck every other character up as much as you want to. And naturally, the show does. Like, part 4 did that too, to an extent, but part 5 goes just bonkers in that regard. Like, so many dismemberments, so many limbs torn off, so many people, like, fucking, I don't know, ground into the dust and turned into red goo. It's ridiculous. So if you're not into that, maybe stay away. Anyone else who is in the mood for a good old bloody time, don't worry, you'll have enough of that. But yeah, can you think of your favorite stand battle offhand? Like, is there something that's one specifically that stood out at you? I mean, I already mentioned the battle on the plane.
The fight against Chocolata and Sekko. Jesus. Fucking. I think the Muda that had been longer than anything else that came before it. The big exclamation point on that fight. But man, the actual, the battle of the brains between Bruno and Sekko was fucking wild, and that shit was crazy. Like, I had no idea, what direction, it was gonna take. And that shit, oh man, that was probably one of my big favorites of this series. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I think that was great. Like, those are also two of the creepiest stands.
Yeah, just a bit.
Like Green Day, holy shit. That's
Green Day and
disgusting.
Oasis are.
Yeah. Although, speaking of stand names, I feel like this season, the way they turned the names of the stands, the original Japanese names, which are all band and music references, obviously, again, into the copyright kosher stuff, felt like the most lazy this time around. Like fucking Sticky Fingers became Zipper Man, Sex Pistols became Six Bullets. Like, really?
I think a lot of these names were also used in what was the game that came out? Eyes of Heaven on PS4. So I think, they just kind of took the names that they magicked up for that and transplanted them into this just because it was probably the easiest thing to do.
I guess. But yeah, it's kind of.
But
I mean,
when they start changing the names, like, yes, I'm sure the translation for Eiro Samisu is Little Bomber.
Yeah. So if you watch the show in Japanese, you pick up on that they are not saying the same thing as is in the subtitles. But, so that is a really good reason. Otherwise, you miss out on all the cool little musical references, which is also always one of the most fun things in the JoJo series, I think. And yeah, Seko and Chocolata are great. Like the whole kill squad, the 5-man or 6-man kill squad that come after them in the beginning, who want to assassinate the boss, I think, are really cool. Have really cool stands. I like pretty much all of them and how they use their stuff in really creative ways. And yeah, it's also interesting because this show has two of our antagonists fight against each other at some point, which is the leader of the kill squad and the boss, at this point Doppio, fighting each other, and that's also a very like tense face-off, because who you wonder who gets the clue first and who gets like the first strike, because whoever does it probably will end the fight and everything. It's really cool, really really well done. Yeah, from the main crew, who was your favorite character and stand?
Oh, jeez. You gotta make me choose?
Yes.
What you gotta do
Now's
is
the time.
Who's yours while I'm thinking about this? Because clearly you must have an answer.
I think I like Mista and Sex Pistols the most. I would have liked it more if the voices for the Pistols would have been a bit more like grungy or nasty, like if they would have sounded like, I don't know, evil dwarves or something from fantasy stuff, from a fantasy story or something like that. And their voices are too high pitched. I think it would have been more funny if they were like, sounded angry all the time or something. It had these gruff voices. That would have been more fun. But I just like Mista as a character. His stand has one of the most cool, some of the coolest scenes, the way the bullets are used and everything. And yeah, I think I like Mista the most. But character-wise, Narancia is also great after a while. And yeah, I think those two probably my favorites. Fugo isn't too long in the story. Like, that was a weird thing, actually, because...
Yeah, hey, how about him, though?
Yeah.
Like, I get that, there's, the pivotal point in the story where Bucciarati is like, you all have to make this decision for yourselves. Because, Bucciarati is painted as this guy who has a lot of respect for the people that he works with and that he trusts. And, that's cool. And he says I'm going to be doing some real dangerous shit. I'd like for you to help me, but I'm not going to make that decision for you. Okay, fine. So when Fugo makes his choice and then he just sort of disappears, it's like, oh, how about him, though?
Yeah, I expected him to come back at some point, but he really doesn't, so...
I mean, technically, I guess he does, but, the epilogue is also a flashback, so...
Yeah. And that was a bit weird. I mean, I guess it kind of fits with his character, because he was always, a bit uneven and worried about the whole thing anyway. He was the most fussy of the group. So kind of fits that he would be the one staying behind, but it's still expected him to have like this turnaround and come back to the help of his compatriots at some point. So I wonder if Araki just forgot about him. and then just
Probably.
remembered him at the end. Wouldn't be surprised about that, actually.
I mean, if he showed up in the 11th hour to help them, that would have been cool. If he did a fucking heel turn and ended up, fighting with the boss, that could have been equally interesting too. But, since we got neither, it was kind of like, oh, okay. Oh, all right.
Yeah, it was a bit weird. Oh, one thing, we mentioned band names, but what I also liked in this was that all the Hit Squad members have dessert names. Like you mentioned Chocolata, I think Seko has one too, I don't know which. We also have Jaco, who have a bunch of others that I can't think of right now. But that was also, by the way, that was also a cool fight. Him and his ice stand, that was one of the... White Album was his name, I think. Like, it's a highlight fest of ridiculous twists and turns. Like the dumb shit that Araki came up with how he comes back from sheer impossible odds and hunts them down again. But that was really still. It wasn't so dumb that I wasn't invested. It was super thrilling. Like it was this fucking badass chase, and it was great. I really liked it. So.
I mean, Fugo's name is also, panna cotta, which is a dessert. So
there we go. Yeah. So desserts.
There was some strong theming throughout.
Yeah, desserts and music. Like your favorite things about Italy, I guess. Maybe. Yeah. It's the whole thing. Speaking of music in JoJo's is always great, but the whole thing had like this opera vibe to it. Like there's this, they end up in the Colosseum and everything, but also. The stuff they do with the OP of JoJo's, or have been doing since part 3, is at very end, like the last couple of episodes, they change like the final moments of the OP to highlight the villain and his powers and everything. And when they did that this time, it's like time stopped.
Yeah, they did it twice, and the second time it's like, oh shit.
Yeah. They first, show to highlight Diavolo and everything and his powers. And you get this chorus, this opera chorus and everything, and it becomes really epic and stuff. And then the opening continues normally, and then they do a twist on it again. And when Joro obviously turns the thing around at the end, and that's also new. It was really cool, really creative, and I always love when they do that. I loved it when they did that for the first time in Star Wars Crusaders. That was just such an awesome moment where. Out of nowhere, suddenly the OP stops, and you hear the fucking sound of the world using its powers, and and Dio's like, "The Waldo, time has stopped," and that was fucking amazing. And I think I put that actually in the intro for the episode we reviewed the first 3 seasons of JoJo's on. I think I put that in there. So if you want to hear how that sounds. That's in there. But yeah, in part 4, they did that with showing how crazy and twisted the world of the town of Morio can become. And that also relates a bit to the villain and everything. And then in 5, they did it again. And I hope they keep doing that because it's great stuff. It's a great idea.
It's strong theming to just be like, hey, here's the villain, by the way. You thought everything was cool, but it's not.
Yeah.
I mean, and speaking of the opening songs, Fighting Gold, I'm immediately latched onto that song because it was great. It took me a little bit to get into Trader's Requiem, but after hearing it, 2 or 3 times, I was like, yeah, okay, I can vibe to this. It's pretty good.
I think Trader's Requiem gets really good once they do that shit with the OP because it, like, bumps the atmosphere up to 11. It's like, oh shit, we're getting real, it's coming, the end is coming, the end is near. And that's really cool, like with the whole opera theme and everything, which they also put in the ending. But I also, Fighting Gold might be one of my favorite JoJo's OPs ever. Like, that song, that presentation, everything is so fucking good. Like, holy shit, this is one of the best anime openings I've ever seen. Like, it's amazing visual department, great song, like highlighting all the characters and their powers in perfect way and giving you super interesting and abstract visuals that it's just fucking super stylish, like amazing. I loved it. I think that it's one of the all-time greats at this point, not only for JoJo's but in general.
Yeah, I mean, probably one of my other favorite JoJo intros gotta be Great Days.
Yeah, great. This is too. is great too.
But
Every season of JoJo's had a good one.
yeah, I think you made the argument though that Crazy Noisy Bizarre Town, kind of had was a better primer
Yes.
because it gave us the broad overview of everything in a really cool way. But still, what's your favorite JoJo's intro? Fucking just pick a number out of a hat because they're all pretty damn good.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Crazy Noisy Bizarre Town was that order or the other way around.
I'm pretty sure it was Crazy Noisy Bizarre.
Yes. Was just a good table setting OP because part 4 is so different from part 3 that you need a good OP to show you immediately, oh, here, this is a different thing, this is all set in the same town, this is mostly about the small little weird stories that and things happening in this town, at least for the first 2/3 of the show. And I think the first OP did a really good job, and then at that, and I think Great Days just expands on that after we got familiar with everyone in that part. And yeah, speaking of part 4, I think part 4 did a really interesting thing with its villain, Kira, where he was just a normal guy, kinda, who wanted to live his life. But he wanted to kill a lot of people, don't get me wrong. But
he wanted to live in peace.
But he also wanted to live in peace. So it was a bit more, a reserved, small thing when compared to the lofty ideas of Dio and the Pillar Man. And it was just really interesting. And I feel like both JoJo's 4 and 5 were really good at disposing of their villains with some poetic justice on the side. Like I said, Kira wanted to live a normal life in his own way and dies in the most mundane way.
Yes.
A free car accident, which is like, hey, you got your normal life and death. Here you go. And I think
poetic justice.
Yeah, and I think the same happened in part 5 with Diavolo forever being trapped by his ability, and with the help of Golden Experience Requiem, like he's forever trapped in a prophecy of an infinite possible ways he might die. And that felt really good. And it took some...
That shit was... Man, when at first I was like, wait a minute, hold on. How is he dying over and over? And it's like, oh, geez, that's what a way to go.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And that was kind of what got me on the show's side again after losing me a bit with the villain, because what they tried to do with the bad guy in this show, like the main bad guy, the boss, Doppio or Diavolo, is we don't really know his identity in the beginning. Only see him like in shadow and everything, and then we don't meet him for a while, and then a new character appears on the scene, and that character is Doppio. And as it turns out, Doppio has a split personality, and the other side of his personality is Diavolo, who is the boss, and he only like comes forward when really needed. Otherwise, he hides in Doppio to keep up appearances and everything and be inconspicuous. Well, inconspicuous.
As much as he can be.
Is far-fetched, because every time he wants to talk to Doppio makes a noise of a ringing phone and then picks up a random fucking item and talks into it like he's fucking talking on the telephone with the boss, which is treated like a completely different character. And I think that's a super interesting idea. I don't feel like they did enough with that, just in terms of how that plays into how his powers work, how he came to be, what his motivation is and everything, and where that results from. And I don't know, it all felt a bit weird, and there's a disconnect because we spent a lot of the time with Doppio as a character, kinda, and his weird antics. And then sometimes the boss comes out and it's really threatening and everything, but we only see the Doppio version of him. And it's kind of hard to take him seriously because he's so goofy. So there's a bit of, for me, there was a bit of a disconnect there. And I don't know how you felt about this.
I guess I could see why you'd say that. Maybe it was just, no, maybe I was gonna say maybe it might have just been a way to keep it as much of a mystery to us as it was to the characters, to avoid using, one of my favorite narrative tools of dramatic irony, where the audience or the reader knows something that the characters don't. But that's not, that's only somewhat the case because there's still a lot of unknowns even after they introduce Doppio, because we know he has something to do with the boss, but for a while we also don't know that, oh, he was the boss all along.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Maybe that was Araki's way to try and
Put a twist on this.
put a twist or some misdirection in there. I don't know.
Yeah, because otherwise he's kind of. I wouldn't say he's like a copy really of Dio or anything, although his power set is eerily same-ish. Like, they try to call it something else, like him being able to see into the future, but it kind of is the same thing as the world's power set, where he stops time and looks into the future and then changes it, kind of.
I think it's more explained as more of a time skip as opposed to a time stop.
But it's time powers, right? So,
yeah.
And it manifests for us as a viewer and for the other characters the same as Dio's power does, as you see something disappearing or something happening, you don't know how it, or something appearing, you don't know how it got there. Suddenly a character is gone, suddenly a character is somewhere else. And with Dio's power is because Dio stopped time and changed things. And with Diavolo, it's because he skipped forward in time and changed things. So it's kind of the same thing, visually wise, too. So
yeah.
The characters are very similar. Don't get me wrong, it looks cool, it looks interesting, especially when Doppio sees the future in a strand of his hair. I think that was a very interesting visual idea. I like that a lot. That was cool. That was super cool. Like, the way that this is staged, as usual, the presentation in JoJo is kind of, no one could call it flawless. Like, there's some stiff character movement here and there, but just everything aside from that, the coloring, the designs is so outlandish and so different and interesting and unusual that it's like you're just blasted by this craziness and you suck it all in. You just take it all in. You want more and more and want it to get crazier and crazier. And it's just a blast to look at. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the same for the power set of Diavolo and all the power sets of the stands in this show, in this part as well. In general, I think this is probably the best looking JoJo show so far. Like, the amount
certainly the most stylish.
Yeah, I think the amount of fluid character animation, like with a lot of focus on small facial and body movement, is staggering in this one. I really think this was the best looking JoJo series so far. Maybe not in character designs. There's some I like the blocky 80s designs of the characters in Stardust Crusaders more, just from design sensibility. But I still think that how, in terms of creativeness and everything, in terms of creative stand powers, this was probably best looking shows. Maybe not the most interesting vistas and set pieces, but everything else design-wise was super tight. So back to the villain. We get Doppio, like, for most of the time, and then at the very end we get Diavolo. But we also see certain events from his point of view, and kind of like Kira, even more so, he often feels like he is in over his head. Like, a lot of the other JoJo's villains feel like they have it figured out, like they have a master plan. Of course, they lose at the end anyway, but still, it feels like they're very confident. They're very, they know what they're doing. And the boss at a certain point, especially once the Doppio version is introduced, feels like he kind of knows what he's doing and he kind of has a plan, but he gets very close very often to getting fucked up, like so fucking close. While Dio couldn't even be touched for a while, and Kira was, I don't know, maybe intelligent enough, smart enough to figure enough things out and keep his secret life under wraps for most of the time, that he was able to elude most of our heroes for most of the show's runtime as well. In this case, like in the beginning, it feels like the boss is this elusive character, but once the Doppio version of him gets introduced, it's like it feels like he is bumbling around a bit. I don't know how you felt about that. A
Yeah,
lot of a lot of the things that go his way come down to sheer luck, I think.
yeah, yeah. You're right. He does sort of luck his way through certain situations, especially when Risotto is out to get him, and he just sort of happens to be in the same area as Team Bucciarati, and then they mistake Risotto as their target, and they off him super hard, and Doppio's just like, oh well, I guess I get off scot-free or something. It's just like,
I mean, he kind of helped with that, but he would
yeah,
have been fucked if they weren't there. That's the
yeah,
thing. Like he used the his environment to a perfect advantage, but if he didn't have that, he would have been fucked. So it's
yeah.
like these like near death escape thingies usually only happens to the main protagonist of the story. So it was kind of weird to see the villain that happen to the villain several times. Like I get that happening in the final fight, and we get like a nice reiteration of the character letting himself getting punched in the right destination he wanted to fly to grab a particular item. Dio did that too, where he's like, Jojo, Jojo, you fool, you punched me right where I wanted to be. And I think that that's the same happens to Diavolo at some point, or he punches even himself to get to that point. So, there's some callbacks to that. But even aside from that, we have enough of near fatal death experiences for him, and it makes him look a bit like a fool at times. I'm also not so fond of the look of his stand. King Crimson looks super weird.
Yeah,
And
King Crimson doesn't really give off the menacing aura that, say, something like the world does.
yeah, or even Killer Queen. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, just not fond of his design. I think the world was pretty like standard. I don't know, looked like a knight in armor or something a bit, or berserker or something like that. And Killer Queen looked super cool and weird, like a cat thing.
Mm.
Even wearing a cat in his belly at some point, a cat flower. But JoJo gets weird sometimes, all the time. But this time around, I didn't really like that stand. And every time Diavolo talked through his stand, I was like, yeah, that weird goofy eyes and that weird goofy fucking mouth and face and that weird second face on his head out of here. It's just like he looks a bit dumb. There are much cooler, much more threatening, much more weird and interesting stand designs in this show. And it's sad that this is what the main villain's stand looked like a bit. Not a fan. But
Well,
that is but that is one of the few things that I didn't like about this part of JoJo's. We also, I forgot to mention it. We talked about the shows connecting the parts loosely connecting between each other. We get some nice extended info on the original and stand powers in general in this. That they are created by an extraterrestrial virus embedded in the arrow's metal, because that metal came from an asteroid, from space, basically. And, then was forged into an arrowhead, and when used on a person, that weird virus activates the hidden stand powers, but only for some people. It would kill the rest. Which was just a neat lore extension, in my opinion. So finally we learn, okay, so this is an alien virus, and it activates some hidden genes in a person's body and transforms them so that they can use a physical manifestation of their inner power or something. Yeah, this cool idea in general, just extending a bit on the lore here and there, and I always appreciate when a show does that. I like that Part 5 did that too. And it's just dumb and ridiculous enough that it perfectly fits in with the rest of JoJo's. So yeah, that was pretty cool. So we need, I interrupted you earlier, or we interrupted each other, but you still haven't told me what your favorite member of Team Bucciarati is.
I mean, Mista is a good choice, like you were saying. I kind of like Abakio because he has that sort of cool and collected attitude, and the way Moody Blues works to basically use as more as a tool rather than as something that you use in battle. Just like
Yeah.
use it to do research on a reconstruction of what happened in certain places, like which they show them using several times. I thought that was really interesting because it was like, oh, we don't really have to assume what happened here because we have someone who can just use their power to get to the truth of the matter.
Yeah.
And I thought
His
he was
character
neat.
background was also pretty good.
Yeah, he had a pretty neat background.
I mean, all of them did, but his was
Oh
especially.
yeah, but yeah, I think I'd probably go with a Bakio, but I do like. It's hard to really outright dislike any of the Team Bucciarati characters, I think.
Yeah, they're all great. And this is JoJo, so not all of them are gonna make it. That's a big surprise.
A friend of ours pointed out that in all of the promo materials and in one of the intros, they sort of put the characters on different sides of the screen in some interesting ways.
Oh, okay. So they were hinting at it hard who is going to make it and who not. All right.
Yes, it was something that you sort of see and you don't really think much of. Oh, they did this, and then you think about it and you're like, oh, you guys, and it's actually kind of neat to see that they put that in there without sort of like ham-fisting it. So the people who knew, the people who found out, like us, were like, oh shit, that's fucking cool.
Yeah. Just in general, the creators of these shows, David Productions, seem to put a lot of thought into everything surrounding the creation of the show.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about the special things they do in the OP, then what you just mentioned, and that just feels like a really dedicated, like they're really dedicated to turning this into the best adaptation they can make of the source material, and that has come through in pretty much all of the JoJo series, and I can always appreciate that. I think it's really great. Yeah, in terms of how the show wraps up, the final 2 episodes you mentioned before is kind of a flashback and feels a bit like a non sequitur or side story at first. Like we would jump from Diavolo's fate directly into that weird flashback, and you're like, wait, what is happening? What? And it's not short either. It's like an entire episode or something, or 1.5, and you feel like, wait, why are they telling this weird side story from before they met Giorno? What is? Are they trying to show us more that they were a family and everything? We knew that. What is happening? But it makes sense at some point, if you can ever say that about the JoJo story. At the very end, at least in a thematic way. Though I wonder if there wasn't a more elegant way to integrate the whole destiny thing with Rolling Stones into the story at an earlier point. Like maybe show the first part sometimes after Bucciarati gets mortally wounded, which would have been an effective way to make us believe that he can be saved. And then come back to the flashback right at the end where it is revealed that Mr. interfering probably only made things worse. Maybe you could have wrung some more emotions and surprises out of this plot beat that way. The way they handled it here, it felt a bit like an afterthought, which again, considering how Araki approaches some of his material, makes sense, maybe, but there are some ways that could have been more effective. So, bit of a wasted opportunity there, in my opinion. But it's not like it's bad. Like I said, it makes thematic sense, and it feels like a good wrap up and a good send off for all the characters and everything.
Yeah, I mean, it is odd, but it does. I was saying to, again, a friend of ours that I feel like in a weird sort of way, it brought the story full circle.
Yeah, it definitely did. And like I said, if you had put that one part somewhere else, you could have made that a bit better and then make it really feel full circle at the end. Because now, we get all of the brunt of that backstory and that flashback at this, in one big swoop. And if they sparse that out a bit, that maybe would have worked better. But it still works. That's the message here. So it's still a cool idea and cool thing to do, and it kind of fits into this grand opera theme we got going here. And yeah, I liked it. I liked all of this pretty much, except for maybe the villain. Not the biggest fan of Diavolo, but he also has a cool design, and not his stand, but he himself. At the end, I think he looked really cool. And there's enough cool twists and weird story beats happening that you are always kept on your toes, just like JoJo does always. Enough surprises, enough twists, enough turns, everything. I was never bored watching JoJo's. I'm never bored watching JoJo's. For people out there who really like Stardust Crusaders and maybe were taken back a bit by the more slice of life-ish nature of part 4, maybe you might like this one more, because this is again more of a straightforward plot, which part 4 only really was in the last third. And maybe if you fell off JoJo's in part 4 for some reason, maybe try to get back into it with part 5. Maybe that will be more to your liking. John and I liked all of them. Like John said, part 4 is probably his favorite part, by minus part 3. But we both like part 5 anyway. There's just a bunch of cool stuff in here that would make any JoJo's fan happy. Some people already said that this is their favorite season, I think, and I can see why. There's enough to like in here. I mean, the weird ass dance / torture scene alone is worth the asking price.
God, that scene was, oh my god, so fucking weird.
Tell me another show where you would see something like that.
Nothing. No other show.
No, it does not exist. It's just of that fucking non sequitur out of nowhere, weird ass abstract dance number, while the guy in the forefront is fucking tortured by sunlight through his fucking eyeball. Insane! That's what JoJo's is. Insane amount of fun! Yes, in good times. And bad times, and good times again. And yeah. We can't sing JoJo's praises hard enough. Like, in our opinion, you should watch all of them, all of the parts, all of them. But you can, if you don't want to, you can jump into this part, I think, without needing to watch the other parts. This is kind of a standalone story, loose connection to the previous parts through Giorno being Dio's son. But it's not like they do anything with that, really. It's just like, yeah, that's how he is, that's how he got his powers, and that's his legacy, but which he's going against. But that's it, really. That's all the connection. The rest is its own story, which is a good story, with cool characters, with surprising death here and there. And yeah, a lot of heart. Again, JoJo's always has a lot of heart. But yeah, this is one of... Part 4 probably has the most, but this also has a lot of heart, especially when it comes to its core characters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, family. That's
family.
Yeah, it's very important. So yeah, we are definitely looking forward to more JoJo's. Next chapter in the story is Stone Ocean, which features Jolene Joestar, the daughter of Jotaro, the protagonist from part 3 and 4 to an extent. So yeah, I wonder what that's gonna be like.
Jolene Joestar or Jolene Cujo?
I was going for Joestar, obviously, right? Because she is a Joestar, but just in terms of legacy.
Yeah.
But yeah, but you're right. It's Jolene Cujo.
I mean, it's part of the same bloodline, yes, but
yeah. No. So yeah, looking forward to Jolene, first female main protagonist in this series. I wonder what she has to offer. I can't wait for whenever that show comes around. And yeah, until then, please watch JoJo's. I think what we have, we already gave you a disclaimer. If you have an easily upset stomach, if you can't handle your gore, maybe stay away. Everyone else, don't get discouraged by the inherent weirdness of JoJo's. It's its main attraction and its main charm. factors. So if you can get into that, you will have a fantastic time. And that counts for part 5 as well. I had a good time.
So did I. And if, all that sounds good to you, you can watch pretty much the whole thing starting from part 1 on Crunchyroll. So get watching.
And that is a wrap on the 79th episode of Anime Brain Freeze. All the music in our show is from the Double Dragon Neon soundtrack by the amazing Jake Kaufman. Please go to vrt.bandcamp.com and check out his awesome work. Our show is available on most of the popular podcast services, but it's always worth visiting animebrainfreeze.com for our review index and more. Leave us comments and questions on YouTube, follow us on Twitter at AnyBrainFreeze, or send an email to animebrainfreeze@gmail.com. We would love to read your feedback. Thanks for tuning in, we hope you had a good time, and please join us again on our next episode. Macht's gut!
So long, everybody. Next time on Anime Brain Freeze.
A deadly circus is coming to town.
And we explore the secret origins of Gundam.